Hello and welcome to the In the Money Players podcast. This is our show for Friday, February 10th. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back with you in the Brooklyn Bunker. Once again, we have separate shows this week for the Coast to Coast Pick Fives. You can find me and JK in your audio feed talking about those. On this one, I'm very happy to be joined by InTheMoneyPodcast.com's own Nick Tammaro. Nick, how are you?
Doing great, Pete. Ready for a big weekend of racing and a little football on Sunday. Couldn't beat it.
Yeah, we'll get your Super Bowl opinion in here at some point as well. But let's start off with the Derby points races. We've got three of them, starting off with the rescheduled Withers Stakes at Aqueduct on Saturday. Interesting little race with a bunch of horses we've talked about a lot. Who are you going to be betting?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the most appealing from a betting perspective. The horses that headline it are Hit Show and Arctic Arrogance. Arctic Arrogance is a horse that we've talked on here before, that twice in a row now has looked like he's been well on his way to winning a major stake race and has somehow come up wanting in the stretch. And so to combat that, Linda Rice is adding blinkers, which, I certainly don't think it could hurt. It's probably going to make him a little bit more of a committed front runner, which I don't think is a bad thing either. I think it's the quickest way around there for a horse with his style. So I'm intrigued by Hit Show. I kind of brought him up as a way off the wall long shot type in our look at the future wager last time around. He has a nice pedigree on the dam side for distance. His dam actress won the Comely at Aqueduct at 1 1/8 miles, and it looks like the cancellation really did him no harm. He was at home until last week, and then he ended up working. It's not listed in the racing form. I thought he worked with Looms Boldly, so I'm not sure why that's not logged.
Oh, that's interesting.
I thought I read somewhere where he worked with Looms Boldly last week at Belmont. Maybe not anything that was significant or timed. So
yeah, maybe they were just jogging.
Yeah, exactly. I think distance-wise, he really becomes a great fit here. And, the concern that you have with Arctic Arrogance is what exactly is going to happen with 90% Maddie and Andiamo La Firenze, because they've got to be forwardly placed. So I think Hit Show really gets the run of the race with a little bit of pace expected. And I think he truly looks like the horse in here who stands to benefit most from the 1 1/8 miles.
My only fear with Hit Show is, this angle we've talked about so many times about, Lasix on, Lasix off. If the Lasix was the reason for the big step forward last time, that will not be in effect. So it made me take a long look at the three, Jungfrau for Bill Mott, who's just been going such great guns. This one's proven without Lasix and is another who could benefit if Arctic Arrogance and the 6 and 7 end up hooking up early, and or if Manny decides to be more aggressive than pace figures suggest with Hit Show. Can you see Jungfrau at all in this spot?
I'll tell you the interesting thing about Jungfrau to me, Pete, is that in that 1 1/8 miles maiden race in November, he took a ton of money. And remembering back to that race, I think it was on a Sunday in November, shortly before Thanksgiving. That was a field that included a couple of horses that had run well prior, and he, including Krupe, who everybody was wanting to bet back after he, kind of closed from the clouds at Saratoga,
Right.
and Jungfrau just got bet and bet and bet, and the money never retreated at all. And he really didn't run that well, but he came back and he ran well to a horse called Expect More from Todd Pletcher's barn at Gulfstream, who at least has some ability. So yeah, I think this is a horse who was added to the field with the cancellation from last week. And I think he's a great addition because while he is another type, I think that stands to benefit from the pace perspective. He was actually pretty close to a strong pace last time. And so that'll keep him from being quite as far back. He really rates to get the jump on a horse like Hit Show.
But Hit Show is still your selection in here?
Yeah, I don't think Hit Show ran that badly 2 starts back. So I'm going to take maybe the Lasix made him a little bit better, but maybe also the experience and the distance is getting him there as well. I don't love having to pay to find that out at 8 to 5, but that's why this is a little bit more of a viewer's race than a punter's race.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. You got to figure, just as you joked the other day, breathing the same air as Looms Boldly had to do something for him to move him forward.
If he was that close, look at what it did for Shadow Dragon.
Let's go all the way out west to a race that once in a while produces a horse that makes some noise on the Triple Crown Trail, including a Preakness winner in recent years, the El Camino Real from Golden Gate. This is race number 8, 7:54 scheduled post time for it. You got some shippers up from Southern California. I'm hoping this is a spot where a local runner who makes a lot of sense, like Passarando, ends up being a more of a bettable favorite because of the presence of some of these other horses in here. I just like the fact that the horse is proven around Golden Gate. I mean, I'm thinking with the damn side pedigree, this is a horse that shouldn't have problem with the extra distance. Just a tepid selection for Passarando for me. Do you have anything in here to share?
No, I agree with you completely. I think he also stands to get a really good pace setup as well. And Time from US has this thing fast on paper. How much the two Bob Baffert horses will battle early really is kind of a wild card. But Harson looks like he's one-way speed, so I don't see them running him at a mile and an eighth around 2 turns, stretching out in distance because they think that they want to rate. So a little bit of an acid test for that son of Golden Sense, who's a perfect 2 for 2 and has looked pretty darn good in his 2 prior starts. I just wonder if this might be a little too much too soon. I mean, the 2 local hopefuls that you referenced, Passarando, the other one being Chase the Chaos, who was second to him 2 starts back in the Gold Rush. And these look like horses that are really good fits. They're both a little bit quick too, which is good. I mean, they're not, these slow plodding synthetic types. So I could see either one of them winning. And I think they each stand to benefit from what should be a strong pace. I mean, what do you do with Gilmore, I guess, is the real question. He improved a ton second time out, winning at Los Al. Roland Big Joe came back and won a maiden optional claimer at Gulfstream by 14 plus lengths. So it was at least a decent enough race. Bob Baffert has had limited starters, obviously, in the last 5 years on synthetics. He did win this race last year. So it's not something that you can, I think, completely overlook in terms of Gilmore, who, while Time from US has him on the front end, he's probably going to be in more of a stalking position, and he might get the baton a little bit before those closers have a say.
Let's head to Tampa, and we'll go off the Triple Crown points races for a second to talk about the Oaks division and the Suncoast, a race I bring up only because you and I had talked about, maybe early week looking for ways to beat Wonder Wheel and or Julia Shining. If folks want a full rundown of the Tampa card, well, from race 3 on anyway, on the Tampa card, Rich Averill and I are doing that on the plus side in themoneypodcast.com/plus. If you want to check that out, Rich had some really interesting long shots along the way that folks may want to check out. But now that you've had a chance to look at the Suncoast, Nick, who's your selection?
As much as I wanted to find an alternative to both of them, it does feel like Wonder Wheel is in an awfully advantageous spot. And, one of the things about Wonder Wheel, and I don't want to be labeled a detractor of hers at all, because I do think she's a very solid horse. She's gotten this status that I don't really know why she has it. I guess because Mark Casse speaks about her sort of glowingly. And I will admit, I even tweeted yesterday or the day before when he said she was the best 2-year-old he's ever had. It's like, buddy, you had the 2-year-old champion 6 years ago. And if you think Wonder Wheel was a better horse than Classic Empire, then, maybe she's friendlier around the barn or something, because she's not nearly as good on the racetrack as he was. But with that said, the versatility that she showed in the Breeders' Cup, I do think is admirable, because she's a filly who we thought was going to get burned up on the front end. And she ended up rating very comfortably and gave Tyler Gaffalione a whole new set of really a whole new slew of weapons basically in the arsenal, so to speak, in being able to sit back and make one run. This feels like it should be an honestly run race. I think that she'll get a pretty massive jump on Julia Shining. And I think the interesting thing to me is, what exactly will Julia Shining do in a fast-paced route where she's going to have to get her engine cranked quite a bit sooner? That was a slow-paced race last time out. She just has that grinding way about her that her sister Malathot sort of had as well. One of the things about Malathot is that as she got older, she became a little bit less of a grinder. So maybe that's what we have to look forward to with Julia Shining. But I think the key in here is to bet against Julia Shining. It's to bet Wonder Wheel and the exactas with some of the horses that might offer a little bit of value. I wish I had some level of confidence that Ticker Tape Home was going to take to the dirt. I know she's been training up at Cassie's farm, but she's a good horse, and she's run well on turf and synthetic. The pedigree, at least, is not totally geared towards synthetics and turf. The top side obviously is good with Medaglia d'Oro. So maybe a cold punch 1-8 or something along those lines. I could also see myself getting maybe a little bit interested in a horse like Charlie's Wish. Who'll probably benefit from getting a little more ground after really surging late last time out to miss behind Opus 42.
All right, interesting ideas there. I was going to try to maybe think, with this being more along the lines of a prep and a horse who'd presumably spent some time at the farm and being down on the inside, I was still going to try to beat Wonder Wheel despite how logical she is. And I agree that I just think it's an interesting chance to take a shot with a couple of long shots. And I do think Ticker Tape Home, just based on those good figures on the synthetic and the turf, is the one. Medaglia d'Oro of Warfront Cross. I mean, why not for the dirt, really? I think it's no certainty, but I think at the prices, it's worth taking a shot. And then I thought that Opus 42 was a little bit interesting, maybe to confirm that form with Charlie's Wish. And I certainly don't mind throwing in a little bit of Charlie's Wish too as a backup, given there was only a nose between them. Love the race over the course. And with Opus 42, I think this distance is going to be her friend. So I was looking at 2 and 8 sort of on the top line and 3 on the back line to maybe try to dethrone the big ones. Nick having a little bit more confidence with the 1 and looking to mix in the 8 and the 3 behind. Let's go on to the next race we want to talk about, which is the Sam F. Davis, the race that gives the day its name down there at Tampa. What'd you come up with in this one, Nick?
Well, it's funny. As much as I said I want to take a swing against Pletcher and Luis Saez with Julia Shining, I love Litigate in this race. I think Litigate is a great fit. This looks like a race that, I mean, boy, if there should be a fast pace anywhere in the country on Saturday, it really should be in here. There's a number of horses that look like they only have one way to go. That happens quite frequently. If you remember, this race last year was loaded with speed on paper, and Classic Causeway was able to still get the job done.
Yeah.
But this looks like a race that really should be run at a strong early pace. And, for me, Pete, from a betting perspective, it's just a really good opportunity to bet against the favorite, Dubyuhnell, who is going to be, he's 9-5 on the morning line. And there are just way too many question marks about him to give you really any level of confidence. I thought Litigate's effort behind Cyclone Mischief was good. I thought he moved maybe a tad early. I think he's a horse that pedigree wise is really geared towards 2 turns and beyond. And so I think the distance will be in his favor. And if Saez can get him to settle about mid pack, I think he'll get plenty of running in front of him. And I've got big knocks on Prairie Hawk and Dubyuhnell. Saffie Joseph Jr. has some pretty awful numbers with horses coming off of Lasix. He's 2 for his last 33 with a sub $1 ROI. So that's a big concern with Prairie Hawk. I think Prairie Hawk's last race was a little bit of a phony anyway. The other horse that I guess is going to get a little bit of money that I could see myself maybe using is Champion's Dream, who I thought was at least finishing well behind Zydeco and should benefit from the extra ground. But I'm not altogether convinced there too. I could see this is a race for me where I think in the multis, I'm going to single Litigate. And if he's 5-1, I'm going to bet him to win.
All right, I like the sound of it. Let's move out west to our other business for the day, which is to look at this late pick 5 at Santa Anita. Again, we'll be doing work on the coast to coast under separate cover, as it were, with me and JK. But here we'll kick off with race number 6. Nick, what numbers did you want to use to light this candle out at Santa Anita?
Boy, what a race to get the sequence started, a full field. And this is actually a very strong sequence. I think for all of the conversation there is about Southern California racing, take a good look at the sequence. I thought the horse to beat was the 9 Midnight Special. I don't have anything terribly clever to say. He looks like the right fit. He's kind of a stick out on the thoroughgraphs too, coming in with a good pattern into this race, dropping from 12-5 to 10. Steve Knapp had a big weekend last weekend. And so this is a barn that looks like it's heating up pretty nicely. So I'm going to use him. I'm going to use Oil Can Night a little bit as well for Milton Pineda, 1 door to the outside. Horse that probably wants to be forwardly placed when all is said and done. And Edwin Maldonado is the right guy to have in the irons in that scenario. So mainly 9s and 10s for me. I'll back up with a little bit of the 6, who looks like a horse that might be in the right spot class-wise.
I had Midnight Special on top as well, taking the drop in class for the Red Hot Barn, and I thought would get a great trip, stalking and pouncing behind the fastest of the speeds, presumably. Had a few backups in there, including your Oil Can Knight, a winning type who could maybe guess to get the right trip. It could. Mighty Matt, I wanted to throw in for a penny as maybe the best closer in a race where there was a ton of speed. And I thought that Handsome Gary was an interesting question mark type off the claim for Wong, a horse that at 6 or 8-1 I'd throw in there. So I had it 9 on the top line with 1, 7, 10. Nick going 9 and 10 with the 6 as the backup. You make a great point about the competitiveness of this pick 5 sequence. It continues with this allowance race number 7, going a mile on the turf. I guess I'm fairly obvious with my top pick, the number 1 Allegato, very consistent, well drawn. And while he did get out late, was stuck in a phone booth for much of the stretch last time. This is the kind of horse, though, that especially earlier in my trip handicapping exploits, this was the kind of horse that I would have made like play of the day type thing because of all of the troubled trips. But after doing that long enough, you realize some horses make their own luck and some horses make their own not luck. That could be the case with Allegato. I still think looks too strong not to use. The 2 Bellotti I thought was an interesting long shot. Closed last time into a slow pace against better and should be all of 10 to 1, I would think. I can't decide what I'm going to do with Silver Surfer, getting the gelding Lasix makeover and possibly on pace figures the best speed. But this is a really long layoff. And I know that D'Amato has a reputation for being good off the layoff, and he is really good off of 6 months. But I filtered it for a year and longer, and the numbers go straight down to where he's just like 10%, which is obviously not so hot for a guy with his good numbers overall. I'm still keeping in the mix as a potential backup, and 6 Restless Spirit for CJ Thoroughbreds was the other one with the East Coast turf form shipping west. D'Amato once again in this one teaming up with Dettori, just another horse who just seemed logical. So I was going to have the 1 and the 2 on the top line, backing up 6 and 7. Nick, how did you see it?
I thought it was a really interesting race. I think Allegato is clearly the horse to beat, as you mentioned, based on the the company lines and the last few performances. One of the horses I was intrigued by that, and I'm going to use Reckless Spirit as well, just on the east to west move. Time to Party beat a relatively weak field 2 starts back, but if you watch that replay back, Joe Bravo sort of drives me crazy with some of the stuff that he does on the turf. This horse made a gigantic move around the far turn. I mean, even in the comment line, it says swift move, second turn, and he just rolled by everybody. It also seems somewhat clear at this point he is a Lasix on horse, and he's getting Lasix back. That's a running line 2 starts back that's good enough to win. I thought it's also interesting too that Papa Prodromo was taking the blinkers off, and he seemed to be a quicker horse without the blinkers. So he's been a more relaxed horse with them. I'm wondering if Bravo is going to ride him a little bit forwardly. I'm going to use him in Allegato. I'm going to back up with Reckless Spirit and Silver Surfer and try and keep it somewhat simple. But I'm going to bet this horse, I think, if he's a decent enough price, because I'm wondering if maybe he's just going to get the right trip close to the pace.
Allegato, meaning?
Time to Party.
Oh, Time to Party. Okay, yes.
Yeah.
All right, makes sense because
he's only 4 to 1 on the morning line. So I mean, it's not a big revelation by me, but he might be a horse that could be. I could see him drifting up off of that too, because I think there could be the public tends to penalize the most recent running line pretty actively. So he could get hurt by that.
That's fair, and one that I definitely want to try to work in there on some backups based on your say so. We go to an allowance race, 6 furlongs on the dirt for race number 8 on a field of 8 going forward. I thought that Let's Go Get Lucky just looked pretty obvious in this spot. Strong numbers, hard trier. This horse gives the impression that he might even be better than what we've seen, I feel like, from just watching that recent tape. I was going to mostly use him and then back up with the progressive, lightly raced sorts, the 4 Spirit of Makina and the 5 Murray, but definitely preference for the 3 for me in race 8 at Santa Anita. Where are you?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the winner comes from that group of 3, right? The 3, 4, and 5. I don't know. I can't really get with Kronbuhl from an inside post. I think he'll have to negotiate a trip that I just really don't see happening. I guess the most dangerous of those 3 for me is Spirit of McKenna, just because he probably is the quickest early. But and his debut win was good enough to contend. His second start, where he made the pace and then got nailed late at Del Mar, was very, very good. But you're having to deal with something similar with all 3 of these horses, is that they're all coming off some kind of mid-range type layoff unseen since the Del Mar summer meet. Murray might end up being the most talented of the 3 as well, given what we've seen from him in limited supply. So yeah, I'm just going to use those 3 equally. I'm not going to separate them. If somebody outside of them wins, then I'm happy to move on.
All right, stakes action for the 3-year-old fillies in the Sweet Life going down the hill, race number 9. Nick, what'd you come up with?
I mean, the question to me here, as odd as it sounds, is do you have the courage to really back Itzel as what might be the pretty clear lone speed? I mean, it has not been a banner meet for Umberto Rispoli, and Peter Miller's numbers off the claim are not what they once were. But this is a horse who took a dramatic step forward, second time out, first time turf. Looks like she probably is going to be as loose as can be on the front end. She ran against some good horses in her first start on the dirt. So, it's not as if you could say that she didn't at least show that she might have some ability, but it's it's this cheeky sort of claim and then bam, right into a stake move by Miller that makes you at least you have to notice it a little bit. You have to be cognizant of it. Manhattan Jungle to me is clearly the horse to beat. Michael McCarthy, who is terrific, one of the better trainers in the West Coast. He has really awful turf sprint numbers. He's just not a turf sprint trainer. He's a distance guy, and I think his sprinters are primarily on dirt. With that said, you can't really bet this race without using her. So I'm just going to use the 4 and 7 and try and keep it relatively simple. I could see myself using the 10 a little bit as a backup fun money, who's kind of come into her own in her last couple of starts. I wonder if that has to do with Lasix, which she is now racing without. And as you and I have talked about this a little bit more, I think it might be Paul Matisse tipped us off to this a couple of years ago. It might be a bigger deal with female horses than it is with males. So I'm happy to stand on the 4 and 7, but if you wanted to use the 10 as a backup, I wouldn't have a big argument.
I was hoping the 10 would keep the 7 honest, and that played into my reading of the race. I did put Manhattan Jungle on top. I just think, well, everything you said is correct about McCarthy. I just think on her paper, she looks very much suited to this test based on the turf sprint group form as a 2-year-old. And then that Juvenile Fillies turf big run that screamed cutback. I just, as a fanboy, the Michael McCarthy Frankie combo gets me excited as well. I was going to use the 11 Happy Gal on the B line, probably a little slow, but I just thought might be an interesting use after being against the flow and running a decent figure against several of these last time. Excelia, the 8, comes out of that same race, and I felt like tried to do the dirty work in the middle part of that race, and it didn't really work out. Now second off the layoff, can maybe just sit behind that speed and get the job done. And I was going to use Itzel as the one who I thought would be, if it did play to speed, I did think she would ultimately win the duel. And I don't love the 5.5 to 6.5 down the hill stretch out at all, but best speed in the turf sprint is still an angle that it often pays to keep on side. So I've got the 4 as my lone A, 11, 8, and 7 as a backup. And we'll get to our pay leg. I wish it wasn't the last race. It's so tricky when you have all these first-time starters and we don't get to see the board for this maiden special weight 6 furlong race on the turf. But as far as your late pick 5 tickets, Nick, how are you going to try to get paid?
Yeah, I mean, this is the worst of it, right? Too, because the experienced horses, you look at them and there's the turf form. We've talked about Valiancer. I had a big thought on Valiancer coming out of the Del Mar race in early December, and I just don't know why Jeff Mullins keeps sprinting him, and he keeps sprinting him, and I'm really dying for him to go long again, but he's not much horse. I'll tell you who the pedigree is in here, and it's actually a pretty darn good pedigree, is Vegas Burner. The dam side has 4 turf winners. The dam was unraced, but all 4 turf horses were multiple winners. They all actually ran pretty well consistently. So I think that horse is a big move up on the lawn. The rest of them are just 1984, the 6. The dam was a turf winner. She's dropped 3 turf winners. Obviously, it's D'Amato, so you probably want to give that horse some consideration. Precision Strike is a gun runner, and for all gun runners done, his first time turf winner was Wednesday at Gulfstream, a horse going 1.5 miles on the turf named Hitting Bombs. So there's just really not a lot of turf pedigree in here that's all that interesting. If you wanted to make a case for me for a horse like Azure Star, who's the new gelding and getting Lasix, cutting back for Dan Blacker, I could probably hear it. My problem is that you and I talked to Duke about this on Saturday. You have to be forwardly placed in these straightaway 6 furlong races. You really can't come from deep in the pack. These races are dominated largely on the front end. So I'm looking for this horse to have to show a little bit more speed. So after that gigantic preamble, I'll use the 4 and 9. And I could be convinced into using the 3 as an A as well. I'll probably back up with horses like the 5 and 6.
All right, I like the sound of it. I had the same topic as you with Vegas Burner, just extremely logical off that pedigree. I don't have too much to add to what you said. I was wondering if Com C could get anything done in here. First time as a gelding, and this is a very turf sprinty pedigree. Going to have to show more speed, but at a big price with the Mendelssohn Stormy Atlantic combo. And I say Mendelssohn for turf sprint just because being by Scat Daddy seems logical enough to me. I thought that the 8 looked logical enough. Again, just a pedigree I could see doing well. Turf sprinting, street boss, precocity, and the candy rides run on anything out of a candy ride dam. So I was going to have some 8s in the mix. And then the 10 nuclear was another one that just pedigree wise being by Justify, fast looking workouts on this one. Haven't seen the proper clock or report and just winning connection. So I was going to spread around 4, 5, 8, 10. It's a use as many as you can afford situation if your opinions are strong enough elsewhere. For Nick, I wrote down 4, 9, and 3 on the top line with the 5 and the 6 as backups. Any other races you wanted to talk about or anything to discuss on this edition of the show?
Oh, I think we covered a lot of ground. It's exciting to see the 3-year-old preps. And, this is a little more of a quiet weekend with the Withers being added, obviously helped. And so, we'll get after it in earnest next week. Risen Star, then Southwest, then Fountain of Youth. And yeah, we're Tampa Bay Derby. We're rocking and rolling.
It's a one-way train from here. So we'll buckle our seatbelts. We'll put up, we'll try to do videos for a lot of these Triple Crown preps. We know there's a ton of interest among the YouTube crowd. If you're watching on YouTube, give us your thoughts on the winners of the Withers and the El Camino Real and the Sam F. Davis. Maybe we'll get a giveaway going as weeks go on, but we'll just see if we can get a little conversation going for the moment and leave it there. You can find much more coverage over at inthemoneypodcast.com. If you want to keep up on everything going on the network, you want to subscribe to our free newsletter, inthemoneypodcast.com/email. And over on that website, also lots of free picks and analysis, including daily stuff from Nick, much more on the Triple Crown preps as well from Eric DeCoster and Eric Solomon. InTheMoneyPodcast.com. Check it out. We're going to thank our founding partners, 10 Strike Racing and the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation. Most of all, though, want to thank all of you for listening, for watching, making these shows so much fun to do. This show's been a production of In the Money Media. Our business manager is Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge champion, Drew Coney. I don't know why I stumbled over that this time. Our chief creative officer is the host of JK+1, Jonathan Kinchin. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatel. May you win all your photos.